Hello, welcome or welcome back to the channel. My name is Megan Maldonado, and I want to talk about a really nasty dude today. He's in a romance called Sir Gowther. It is a romance, but it's a lay. I'm reading from the Middle English Breton lays. Breton referring to Brittany. This is a part of France in the northwest. It's a peninsula, has some cultural distinctions from the rest of France. And what is a lay? You might have heard of the lays of Marie de France. If you haven't, don't worry about it. But a lay, spelled L-A-I, often is a short romance. It's within the whole umbrella category of a romance. A lay is usually shorter, maybe 500-600 lines, 1,000 lines, something there. So longer than, a sonnet, but shorter than Sultan of Babylon, for example, which is the previous romance that we read together. Lays often have, we can say, Celtic themes or motifs. You can think of like kind of fairy stuff or magical things. There is some magic here, kind of, in this romance, but a really dark kind of magic. We might even just say that it's diablerie or demonology, demonish. Definitely devilry at work in Sir Gowther. So we're going to read this together. And the question that I want to ask while we read Sir Gowther together is, can a dangerous, even evil man be good? But let's start even just a little less high stakes, maybe. Can a dangerous man be good? And if so, how? What does that look like? Once again, I have a free reading available. If you see me looking down around, it's because I've got my notes and my paper text here with my handwritten notes. But as always, we're going to go online and look at free things because I am just that generous. I'll share my screen now. Once again, Metz Editions, metseditions.org. You can Google Metz Editions Sir Gowther. Gowther is pronounced, or I'm pronouncing it in a way that might not be intuitive to how it looks in modern English. It's going to look like it's pronounced Gowther, but I've always said Gowther. I think that's kind of a Middle English pronunciation-ish, and I must have picked it up somewhere. Let's set that aside. Let's talk the nitty-gritty of romance history, because I want to start doing this. This is what I look into before I start reading a romance, the kind of context, historical backdrop. So, for the record, there are two manuscripts, two Middle English manuscripts that attest to this Sir Gowther narrative. They're both a little bit different. One is a higher brow, more polite version of the romance, and one is the maybe more popular Quentin Tarantino version. And we'll talk about where in the romance we might see those differences results in the manuscripts. This is a mid to late 15th century composition that we're looking at. And is there anything else I want to say? Yeah, it's thought that there are some kind of folklorish elements to the Sir Gowther narrative. Maybe there's other stories that are similar in nature to this one, but there is definitely a character mentioned. He does not show up, but you will probably recognize the name even if you've never read a medieval romance in your life. I'm not going to spoil it for you because we're going to go through it together. I'm not going to read this whole romance line by line, but I want to attend to the general story because I think we can get through it together. If not in one video, certainly in two, actually cover, the whole plot and do some interesting zoom-ins and close readings here. All right, how does Sir Gowther start? God that art of meekest most, Father and Son and Holy Ghost, that brought man on road so dare. Of course, if you need notes, you can click on the notes here, and there's the glossing here on the side. That's supposed to be helpful. Shield us from the fool of fen that is about man's soul to shend all teemis of the air. How are we starting this off? Not uncommon to start off with an invocation to God. Here we have the whole Trinity that bought man on the road so dear, the road being the cross, so referring to the whole Trinity, but Christ bought man. Shield us from the foul fiend that is about man's soul to shinda altimus of the air. That could be, he's about to do it, but I think also there's the sense of about, like he's out and about. He is about this business of trying to harm souls at all times of the year. Who's the foul fiend? You guessed it, it's Satan. Okay. Sometime the fiend had power. Sometime the fiend had poste for to deal with a lady's frey in likeness of her fair. Some unfamiliar words, I'm sure. Even I, for fair, had to gloss or check the gloss and see that it says husbands. So, sometime, at one point, the fiend had the power to deal with ladies free, noble women in the likeness of their husbands. And check this out. Our surprise guest that actually doesn't show up, but so that he begat Merlin and Mo, and roch ladies so mickle woe that fairly it is to hear. So he begat Merlin and others and more, and wrought, wrought he caused, but with a negative connotation, I'd say, caused ladies so much woe that it is wonderful to hear, wondrous. Fairly is a fun word, and I love it so much. It's related to marvels, wonders, but even in a kind of maybe frightening connotation too, or like maybe it's so new and marvelous that it's a scary thing to behold. Not dissimilar, I think, from what we read in scripture of the angels appearing and their what is the constant thing said to the people who are beholding the angels? It's don't be afraid, right? Right? So it's a similar, probably kind of a comparable sense of fear and wonder with Ferdi. What are we learning from these 12 lines? Why am I reading this for you? This is not the exciting chivalrous stuff that I promised in my medieval masculinity series, right? Except it is. What are we getting alerted to at the beginning of this romance? Yes, there's the Trinitarian invocation. Is that so strange for a romance to, have some kind of prayer to God at the beginning? No, of course not. See that in devotional literature as well. But there's a lot of emphasis on the devil. And he's out and about, and he wants to harm people's souls, and he's going to take advantage of women in a very material, even sexual way. I hesitated because I don't know what words are going to get my algorithms messed up. And just as he begat Merlin and others in this same way of sleeping with noble women or sleeping with women in general in the likeness of their husbands. This is, if you're not familiar with any Merlin narratives, he is often, Merlin, described with an origin story of being half demon. This is not intuitive for those who are familiar with Merlin helping Arthur in his court in some very, it's like a very Christian environment, right? Like he's not viewed as a bad guy, but he has this demon inheritance to him, and is that the thing that gives him his magical powers or his ability to know things, manipulate things that are going on? Likely, and yet he's using them for a good purpose. So Merlin being evoked here is not just, I think, a participation in like a ooh, well-known kind of a figure. And I think he would have had some cultural purchasing power, the name Merlin at the time. But it's not just, oh, we're pointing out to Merlin, isn't that so interesting? But I think Merlin's inclusion here, I would argue, is also priming the reader, maybe more implicitly, to think about a man who has some really dark stuff about him and in his nature, but is that prescriptive to how he's going to act? Not necessarily for Merlin's case, but maybe it might be for Sir Gowther. Why is this relevant to Sir Gowther? Well, let's find out. Okay, it's going on about what a marvelous and, fairy thing it is. La di da di da. The fairy thing being women getting taken advantage of in this way. Okay. There won a duke in Estriche in Austria. Don't ask why that's how it's pronounced. Okay, there was a lady who was beautiful, and the Duke married her. We keep going on. Now, their wedding was beautiful. They had jousting. Knycktus of honor the first day, justi gently home to play, hershaftis gan they shaka. On the morrow the Lord just gent made a real tournament for that Larry Sack. So there it's a big, beautiful festivity. You have this gorgeous woman who's marrying this Duke of Austria. Everything is fabulous. Everything is going wonderfully. You have this phrase that I absolutely adore. Ammonia kron con crack. Many skulls were cracked in this whole tournament that was going on. Now, tournament was over. Duke and the Duchess, they consummate their marriage. You know what I'm talking about. 10 years and some deal more, and they have no children. He child non gate, ne she non bear. He begot no child. He didn't get the child, nor did she bear a child. Their joy began to teen waned. Ooh, goodness gracious. To his lady, soon he said, this is tough. He threw the besom bearing. It is good that we tween. Ido, but wast mi team on the Erlismon Urlundis Bay. Forgetting he could not blina. I believe in, in truth, maybe. Ithro. I find you be somewhat barren. I don't know how you're somewhat barren, but I find you be somewhat barren. It's good that we part. I don't waste my time on you. Erlismon Urlundis Bay. I'm not quite sure what airless means off the top of my head. What are lawns? Oh, airless, excuse me. I don't know why this glossing is not lining up line by line. I thought that airless was somehow matching up here. I got very confused for a second. Airless mon Orlundis beso airless. And for grating, he could not blean. He could not stop weeping, crying. So he's going to his wife and saying, you're barren. We've got a part. I can't keep wasting my time on you, which sounds really harsh, but he's weeping the entire time as well. Why do I stress this sad and awful interaction between the two? Because what's going to happen next might seem pretty hard to sympathize with, something that you or I perhaps would be like, no, I would not pursue this option or be okay with it or kind of keep quiet about it if it happened to me. Understand that these are the stakes here. And this is not just a couple hoping for a child, which is already something that can be extremely fraught and devastating for a couple to be barren. More than that, we're talking about the whole of Austria, right? Or whatever duchy, whatever that would consist of at this time period. I don't know off the top of my head. We're talking about Austria not having an heir, basically. So this is the end of the line for the whole family. The stakes are super high. The lady Sigurd, the laddie Sigurd, and mad ill cheer, she sighed and made ill cheer. I would probably do more than sighing if this was said to me, to be honest with you. But anyway, why does it matter that we're thinking of both the start of the romance, lots of emphasis on demonness, and we're getting into the really fraught and sad and complicated situation of this Duke and Duchess who cannot conceive. Why think on that? Well, it's important, it's very critical context going into actually how Sir Gowther comes to be born. Where do we start? The laddie sicked and mad each hair that all failed her wit lair, for she conceived not. She prayed to God and Mary Maid should give her grace to have a child, on what manner shaw ne roch. She's praying to God and Mary, mild, that they should give her the grace to have a child. On what manner? It says she didn't care, and that's fine. So she is praying to God. She's praying to Mary, which is, acceptable for the period, very typical, I should say at least. But that little line there, I love it. On what manner she doesn't care. How she gets the child, doesn't care. Okay. In her orchard upon a day, oh Matamon, she met a man who, truth be told, that her of love besocht, as liek her lord as he micht be, he laid her doon under a tree, with her is will he rochthe. She meets a man. Truth be told, this is as like her lord, as like her husband, the Duke, as he might be. So that's tipping us off to the fact that it's not the Duke, right? Not her husband, but it looks like him. He laid her down under a tree with her is, this is his, with his will he wrought upon her. So he had his way with her. When he had his will all done, when he was finished having his way with her, a ferturt faint he started up son and stood and her beheld. He said, I have gate on a child on thee that in his youth full wield shall be, and weapons weakly weld. So we get this little prophecy here. When he had his way with her, a ferturt faint, it has shaggy fiend here glossed. I don't know why this is not lining up. It's annoying me. Felderfein, he started up son. He started up soon, quickly, and stood, and she beheld him, and he said, I have gotten a child on you. I have begotten a child in you. That in his youth, full wild, very wild shall he be, and weapons mightily wield. So he pronounces that he's begotten a child in her, and that he's going to be full wild, super wild, very wild in his youth, and will wield these weapons very mightily. Doesn't sound good, especially when you take into consideration that this is a demon father telling her what's going to happen. So you can imagine she's already got a sense of like, hey, I have a feeling something's going to go a little bit off with this kid, but you know what? She was really desperate for a kid, and we get that sense up here. Where was it again? She prayed to God and Mary, and what matter she ne wroth? Listen, she wanted a kid. Did she exactly pray to the demon? No, but it's questionable how disappointed, devastated she would have been. What's her response? She blessed herself and from him ran into her chamber, to her room, fast as she could. Let's see. She said to her lord, that lady mild, tonight we might get a child that shall rule our lands. So that's not what she was told. She doesn't mention the demon for reasons that, however dishonest, are probably also sympathetic. She says, an angel come from heaven bright and told me so this same night. I hoped it was God's Gottes sonde. Interesting. It says God's messenger. It almost sounds like son, but that wouldn't make sense. Then this will bring an end to all of our strife. And this is a little erotic moment here. I was actually surprised when I read it. Bedolap, he lacked his wife and said, Dam wisher fond. At even to bed, they whom chase rich duke and no duchess and wold no longer wander. So he grabs her by a fold in her dress, folds her close, and says, Dom we shall fond, which is indeed to, and I actually have the note here. It says to make love, and that is correct, in the erotic sense. But the word also has other meanings, I thought was interesting. It can also be used to try or to test something out. And so she's saying to him, she's making a little bit of a prophecy declaration saying, an angel came to me and said, we're going to have a child, we're going to conceive today. And so he's responding, he seems pretty excited, like maybe a little turned on. He's grabbing her by the clothes and saying, okay, we're going to make love, but it's also like, well, let's find out what's going to happen. So we're building anticipation here to see what's going to happen next. The demon told us kind of a gnarly uh, prophecy that was a little bit vague, but didn't sound super promising. She's giving her own version of it, not telling her husband about the demon. And so he played him with that laddie hind, and Aod show bonden with tho fiend. So he played him, he enjoyed his wife, I suppose, with that gracious lady. He played with that gracious lady and went, she went burdened with the devil's child until God would release her of that burden. And they would bonden with offend to God would loss her bond. And it affirms the text that this child is indeed Merlin's half brother. So if you remember back at the top where it said the fiend or the great, the foul fiend goes about looking like women's husbands and sleeps with them, and that's how Merlin was begotten. The narrator affirms for us that Merlin is indeed half brother, which means the same fiend that went and uh, fathered Merlin somewhere. Is that relevant ever again? No. I don't know why this is brought up. Probably, I would assume a little bit of like a wink and a nod where you get kind of like you get in what like Avengers movies now where it's like, oh, so and so, like, oh, Tony Stark told me to tell you hi, and then the audience is like, oh my God, I know him, like that. I guess it might be a little bit of that situation, but maybe there's another argument to be made, but plot-wise, Merlin is not relevant at all. I'm sorry to tell you. If you were really excited about that, read him elsewhere. There's a prose Merlin cycle. Go read that. Okay, let's read about what this little kid does. First of all, he gets christened, which I find to be very interesting because he's a demon baby, and it's not always obvious that people who are demons or begotten by them, it's not always obvious how they're going to respond to sacraments. And so if he's christened, that means he is baptized. He's christened, called Gowther, pretty typical in this period, also in the early modern period, when you get named, when you get baptized, which is very soon after you're born. So he soon that this that sitten wax brem and brath Gowther. He soon waxed, he became, it says fierce and violent here. So he's already a baby. He just got baptized, and he's fierce and violent. And yet he still got baptized successfully. I'm thinking of an example where a demon could not stomach going to church. And in fact, that actually happens, I would say, pretty frequently. But the romance King Richard Coeur de Lion, in Richard Coeur de Lion, this is a specific King Richard romance. This is Richard the First, and obviously medieval. And what happens, I shouldn't say obviously, because Richard II also lived in the Middle Ages. Anyway, Richard Coeur de Lion, Richard the First, he has a demon mom, and there are people in the court who suspect her of being a demon because she's like never showing up to church or anything. But then finally, the husband is like, hey, the king, he's like, hey, there's some talk about you. Really, I need you to go to church. And I believe I don't think it's just when she enters the church. I think it's like at the elevation of the host or something, and she like flies literally away, taking Richard's sister, she apparently had, and then leaving Richard himself. And so it's understood that, okay, this was a demon woman. Richard's mom is a demon. He never does anything explicitly like magical or supernatural, but he has some funky behaviors that are actually kind of evil after that. Um, so anyway, what I'm trying to say in this possibly unnecessary tangent is that it's not obvious that somebody who has kind of demon parentage should be a-okay after getting baptized, and yet he is. It's a little interesting. Recall again my question at the beginning. I'm asking, can a dangerous man be good? Can evil man be good? If so, how? What does that look like? What's the mechanism for making him good? Is he starting off good, becoming evil, vice versa, or is he both simultaneously? Um, I just want to keep in mind that being Christian, so he is now baptized. That's a sacrament that brings him into the Church Catholic, even at this point, in the Middle Ages. And yet he's evil. He becomes fierce and violent. And you might think, oh, well, being fierce and being violent doesn't make you evil. Let's stay tuned because you're gonna maybe change your mind. Okay, so the Duke comforted the Duchess and blah 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 blah. Normally, a especially a noblewoman is not going to always nurse her own child. You're probably familiar with the concept of a nanny or a babysitter, or like a regular babysitter, somebody who's almost co-parenting, but without the same hierarchy of authority. Somebody who's there to help raise the child and especially do all the kind of mundane, time-consuming tasks. There's something called a wet nurse. And this is a nurse whose job is to breastfeed the child in question. So it's not the mother, it's somebody else, just in case you're not familiar with the concept. So they got different women, full good knichtes wiefes, good knights' wives. Little Gowther here, he sook it home, so they lost their lives. Son had he slain three. So infant Gowther kills three wet nurses by nursing so hard that he kills them. I guess, all the fluids from their body. Medical theories about fluids and body, what the fluids were was breast milk distinct from blood or from other fluids, was not as clear cut in the medical knowledge as it is today. So more realistic that you could suck all the fluids out of a woman breastfeeding, simply, well, yeah, and drain all the necessary fluids, not just the breast milk, right? So he's killed three women doing this, and he's still a child. The child was young and fast he wakes. The Duke gar prick after 6. Hind Harkins ye be 12 months was gone. Nine nurses had he slain of ladies fair and frey. After a year, he's killed 9 women doing the exact same thing. One wonders why it has gotten that far. I would think after one, maybe you're like, I don't know, what happened here. Maybe there was an accident. Two, if you're not calling quits after two, you're at least suspicious. Three, I think, makes a pattern, but 9 are dead now after a year. And the knights who were married to all these women and other women who might get hired for the job, they go to the Duke and they're like, we're not losing any more of our wives. Put a stop to this. So the Duke gets his own wife, the Duchess, the mother of this child, and she starts to nurse him. Hooray. His mother fell a fool on hap. Upon a day, bade him though pap. He snuffled to it so, which is kind of cute. He snuckled, she offers her breast and he snuffled to it. He kind of snuggles up, suckled it. Um, he rough the head fro the breast. He bites the nipple off of her breast. But she makes it out alive, so I would count her lucky. She fell backward and called a priest to chamber fled him fro. So now we're calling a priest. Again, why not do it sooner? I don't know, but I think now they're starting to realize that something's a little bit off here. So women just give him suck no more, so nobody's gonna breastfeed Gowther ever again, giving him rich food, and that full much as him behoved, for safely may I swear, as much food as he wants and regular food now, long before it's typical for children to get regular food. You can probably also tell he's got probably a full mouthful of teeth, long before it's necessary. And when we think of monsters in general, not just medieval, but monsters of any kind, What's something we normally associate with being evil? Well, it's lots of teeth, something that's ready to bite and consume and tear into you. It's not just animals with sharp teeth, but we think of something having unnaturally either too many teeth or precociously developing teeth. There's something evil about, like very inherently threatening that we just kind of intuitively sense. Okay, so we learned that at 15 he's got a sword. Well, he makes a sword actually that nobody else can wield. It's a falchion. This is a sword with one edge. It's kind of a curved blade to it. If you Google it, you'll be able to find it pretty easily. Both of steel and iron. Oh, there's a note here. But falchion Gowther has made for himself symbolic value. Now, blah blah blah. You'll see a little bit of spoiler stuff. Falchion, unlike the straight word of the Christian knight, is of Oriental origin. Weapons the Saracen would carry. Further, like its Saracen creators who had their dark origins in the race of Cain, were always reclaimable through baptism. Like Gowther himself, who was born of a devil, the falchion has potential for good or evil. I would add that this mixed metal situation, now I have to admit, I could be totally off base here because I'm not super familiar with medieval metallurgy and particularly blacksmithing and how to make falchions. So forgive me, I'm not well versed in that. That said, I think that this mention of steel and iron put together in the single sword is an emphasis, albeit implicit, of his dual nature, let's say, is being born, this steel and iron both coming together into this weapon that, yes, can be used for good and for ill, and we find that it will be used for both in the course of this story. He's not getting set up to be a great hero here. He's already violent, seemingly from birth, despite his baptism, maybe despite. When he's 15, he's already precociously making this weapon that no man can carry, and he's still a boy, although he is growing at an incredible rate. In 12 months more, he grew than other children do in 7 or 6 years. He seemed full well to read. He was so wicked in all keen ways, though Duke him mich not chastise, but mad him knecht that tide with cold braid brond. So his father is unable to really chastise him, perhaps unwilling, but certainly just says mich not chastise, and could be unable and unwilling. Made him a knight. We understand that he's wicked. He's so evil. For sorrow, the Duke fell down dead. His mother was so woe of red, her care and show mich not heed. Now she already knows exactly why he is the way he is. She's probably feeling a little guilt. We're getting lots of emphasis on his evilness, his wickedness, the devilry of it all, the demonic nature. And the text is pointing us out to, yes, he's got these dual natures. He's human and he's wicked. Maybe are those the two natures though? I guess I'm wondering that right now. If he has two natures, what are they? Is it that he's human and demon? Yes, factually, we understand that. But there's another identity too that I think might be available. He's christened, and yet he's also got a demon father. So he's wicked. He is dangerous. He's already killed people, even in his infancy. Got a pretty high body count already. The murderous kind of body count, I mean. And yet, it seems like there might be some kind of promise. We understand that not only is he baptized, but there was that little line, if you remember, about his mother that said, as she was sleeping with her actual husband, that says that she's going to bear this child, bear this, whole burden until God releases her from it. And I don't think that just refers to the birth. I think that we're getting little sprinkles of a promise that maybe there is something redemptive on the horizon for our boy Gowther here. But that doesn't mean that he's not going to cause some havoc along the way. So he goes along with his faction. He's constantly murdering. Faction he would home slow and good her horses Bacchus in tow, alcid paralyze they dread. He's causing lots of perils. He's cutting horses into with a sword, so obviously he's got incredible strength. But his dad's dead, and so now he's the Duke. This is not a great situation for Austria. Keep going on. He likes to hunt. We went to hunt upon a day. Hunting and being awful are some of his hobbies. He goes by, he sees a nunnery, place where nuns live, if you didn't know. The priories and her convent with procession again him went full hastily that tide. They were full fair of his body, for he and his men both lain home be, though soth we surely heed, and sithen he spared him in her kirk and brand him up. Thus con he then went his name full weed. So if he wasn't already popular or infamous, rather he is now. So here's what happens. I'm reading from my notes here to make sure I'm getting clear. So he sees the nunnery, the procession, with the prioress in her convent. They were full afraid of his body. It doesn't say precisely how he looks, but we already know he precociously grew these teeth, and we know he's super strong because he can cut horses in half with a sword. I don't know if it takes him a long time, but even to be able to do it at all, just as one person, is pretty incredible. So he's got to be a scary looking dude. We never get a specific image of how he presents, just that he is frightening to these nuns. Then for he and his men both lane home be. To lane home be, how do I say this without getting in trouble with YouTube? This is what they censor on the internet by calling SA, or a word that rhymes with grape. Um, I'm not trying to be obnoxious and talk around it. It's just I do not want my video to get taken down. Anyway, so what he and his men, it was interesting too. They attack the nuns in this very intimate way, let the reader understand, and he puts them in the church and burns the whole church down with them in it, presumably alive, at least at the time of being kept in the church. Then went his name full wide, then did his name become popular, infamous, and known throughout, well, pretty much everywhere. Now, setting aside that he and his men do this, apparently he has men with him on this hunting party, not uncommon, but his men don't seem to have demon parentage, and yet they're doing this anyway, so that doesn't get attended to a lot, that detail. I think it's quite curious, because I don't know what their excuse is, and Gowther doesn't really have an excuse either, because he's a conscious human, he's not possessed, he's just horrible. Um, but he has his fellow men there kind of doing the same behavior. Hmm. And that doesn't get mentioned, but I wanted to mention it. Anyway, so this is one of the peak moments of evilness for Gowther. This is like almost, I don't want to say comically because it's not funny, but it's like this over the top horrible thing. What's the worst thing you can imagine a guy doing? Well, you know, committing this heinous act against these women who are vowed to celibacy, and then not just killing them, but sticking them inside of the church, which is a holy place, and then burning it down, burning down the church and killing them at the same time. It's like, it's this really over the top presentation of violence and extra evilness that is totally antithetical to Christianity, right? All you have you have all these different I don't even want to say like standards. There's all these different elements of medieval Catholicism that are getting slapped in the face simultaneously. So we're impressing upon you here, the reader, he's a bad guy. But we get that, right? Surely we have to get that already. Why be so over the top with this? Why do so much? Well, finally, somebody at least figures out that something needs to be done. Oh, and he's still doing terrible things to other priests too and friars, and that's still a sticking point for Gowther is that he apparently likes to harm members of the clergy. But an old earl of the country goes to the Duke and says, "Why are you doing this? You are not of Christian strain. You're some fiend's son. We suspect, that works against us this woe. You never do good, but only ill. We hope to be fur sib do dale." Hope is not, I don't know, that's quite how we would use it today. Um, but we think that you are of the same kind as devil, kin to the devil. Sir Guther is outraged at the prospect of this. He's like, "How dare you assume that I am somehow demonic?" As if it never occurred to him that this might be the case. But he goes to his mother and says, "Who is my father? Don't lie to me, or this shall through you glide." And he holds that sword up to her heart. So he's threatening to stab his mother through the heart with this famous sword that he's done so much violence with. She says, "My lord that died last, recently, Teres Hiletun Glid." I believe she's crying here. Um, excuse me. No, I believe you're lying. I think you're lying. And then she tells the truth. And I want to talk about this detail, and then I think we'll close out this portion of our reading of Sir Guther, because I've actually gotten to a lot more granular detail than I expected to. And there's a lot to deal with, but I want to get into this and maybe just kind of close out the plot. So she says, "Son, síðan í shall þósoð say in orchard upon a day a feind gat they there as leek me lord as he might be underneath a chestnut tree." Now we didn't know that before, that this was a chestnut tree. We knew it was in an orchard. We didn't know it was a chestnut tree. What's interesting about chestnuts? The notes help us out a little bit. Traces of the tree may be significant. Let's see, chestnut and its husk is surrounded by thorns, but unharmed by them. For this reason, this is quoting signs and symbols in Christian art. For this reason, it is a symbol of chastity because this virtue is a triumph over the temptations of the flesh, symbolized by the thorns. Why a symbol of chastity? I don't know if I totally buy that reading. I don't doubt that this chestnut might be a symbol of chastity. But I think similar to the falchion, similar to the sword that has the iron and the steel, I think that this chestnut tree, or the chestnut in general, is evocative again of two kinds of natures. There's this prickly, thorny nature of it, and then there's the soft center too. Yes, chastity, hooray, nice metaphor, or maybe it's just a perversion that the fiend does this to the woman under the chestnut tree, although she wasn't, a maid, she wasn't a virgin at the time, so I don't know if that's supposed to be like some kind of perversion of the concept of virginity or chastity. I think that the text is, yes, it's beating us over the head with all the violence, but dropped in, not super subtly, but not as strong-handed as the violence. I think what's dropped in throughout is this sense that Gowther does have two natures to him. I don't know that we know what they are yet, although I don't think it's just human and demon. I don't think those are the two natures. I think we might think of parentage as being very important in imparting something onto the child, at least genetically. But there's a kind of moral inheritance here that doesn't have to do with ancestry specifically, or like genealogy. in terms of, let's say, ethnic heritage or even race. Let's think back to what our friend the Earl said. We hoth du kom never of Christun strin. He's not saying, I don't think you're Austrian. I don't think your father was Austrian. He's saying, I don't think you come of a Christian strain because you're doing all this stuff. It's it's perplexing that that idea that being a Christian might be something that's inherited, something that is borne down over and over again. Is that precisely what he's saying? I mean, if that were true, then they wouldn't need to baptize anybody. So I kind of doubt that there's this idea that, oh, your father wasn't a Christian, so you're not. Although, I don't know, this isn't the first romance where that idea comes up. I've mentioned The King of Tarse, where the father of this baby that shows up in the romance, the father is a Saracen, the mother is a Christian, so the baby is born as a flesh lump, and until the baby is baptized, it's just a little flesh lump baby. And this is on account of, the father being a pagan. Doesn't always happen, but it has happened. And so is the text saying your parentage, your literal genealogy matters? Maybe, or maybe it has some consequence. Um, but there's the Christian strain part of it, and there is the other piece to the romance that we'll pick up on and continue, is that there is a way to fix this whole thing with Gowther. And so if it were just a permanent fact of his was it inheritance? It maybe his, genetic inheritance. If it were a permanent fact of his genetic inheritance that he was just going to be evil because he's got an evil dad, literally a demon or a devil. If that were just what the Earl was saying, I don't think there would be a way to reincorporate Gowther into the body of Christ to make him fully a Christian. But as we will find out, spoiler, there is a way for that to happen. So what I think when we're talking about the Christian strain here, of course, there's the literal parentage that does affect Gowther's moral disposition, let's say. The text is at least asserting that, kind of. But it doesn't lose sight of the idea that there are still two competing natures. So what are the natures? Is it just human and demon? My argument is that it's, as Martin Luther might say, that he is a saint and a sinner. At the very least, he is a sinner, certainly. But there is the possibility of reincorporation or incorporation into the body of Christ, that is the church. So we will find out what he has to do. As a little appetizer, we see that after he learns about his parentage, they both weep. His mother tells him, demon had his way with me, I think was the phrase, under a chestnut tree. Looked like your dad. Well, adopted dad wasn't him. They both weep. Interesting. I think if he were totally evil, he probably wouldn't care. Go schrif thee. Go confess yourself. Mother, do thou best, for he will to Rome, or that ye rest to learn another lair. Excuse me. So he tells his mother, go off, confess. I'm going to make my way to Rome. So he's going to get like the ultimate confession that you can get in Catholicism, right? To learn another way, to learn another teaching. This thought came on him suddenly as soon as he says that. Lord mercy, when he cry, did he cry, basically, to God that Mary bore to save him from his father the fiend. He prayed to God, excuse me, and Mary gentle, that most is of poste, that is the most power to bring his soul to their bliss, that he bought to all of his upon the cross. Realize I wasn't tracking that for you. So he tells his mother to go to confession. He says, I'm going to go to Rome to learn a new way, a new teaching. And spontaneously, and we don't get this a whole lot in romances. This is a whole strain of scholarship talking about interiority or a lack thereof, or theorizations of interiority in medieval literature, especially in devotional literature. But what do I mean by interiority? It's the sense of an internal life. We get that a lot in novels today and have gotten that for some time now. When you think of a character, maybe reflecting an internal monologue, or you have somebody's thoughts written out and you can read their mind because the narrator's providing that information for you. You don't get a ton of interiority in that way in medieval literature. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, obviously, because we have an example right here. It's just not super common. So that's why I wanted to highlight it for us. This thought comes on him suddenly. Lord mercy, he began to cry. So it says the thought comes on him, but then he cries out. Is this an internal cry, external cry? I don't know that it's super clear. But it's almost like he's getting hit with this inspiration, this divine inspiration to pray for salvation. This is coming on him. Yes, he's been christened, but he's getting this only after he's encouraging his mom to go to confession and after he's decided to go to confession. So there we have the first half of our Gowther tale, or our romance of Sir Gowther. Because I've gotten so granular, I've decided to split this up into two videos. I didn't think I was going to do that, but here we are. Not a very long romance anyway, so I think we can get through a lot more together. By all means, keep reading on your own. But we're going to see what happens when Sir Gowther has decided now to go to Rome. Is he going to confess? Is he going to change his ways? How's that going to look? And again, keep in mind this question because I want to keep addressing it. I'm checking my notes because I almost forgot my question. Can a dangerous man be good? Can an evil man be good? And can a dangerous man be good? Are those the same thing, an evil man and a dangerous man? Can a dangerous man be good? We would certainly say that Gowther is a dangerous man. And so for this first video in the Gowther, probably just gonna be a two-part, on the Gowther narrative, but when we're thinking of masculinity in these romances, I want to ask, is masculinity just being super strong and having the capacity for violence? Is there an element of violence in masculinity? How does that look? How does it get checked? And again, can you be dangerous but good at the same time? Or does becoming good mean that you're no longer seen as dangerous? We'll continue exploring those questions in the next video. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.